At the in-laws' house, a Christmas party was planned where my sister-in-law Pamela and I were to bring a meal each. While out shopping from the in-laws' house, I bumped into Chris and Pamela, arm in arm, chatting away happily, oblivious to my presence. You know, Sirius Elvis would never imagine me and Chris having an affair, Pamela chuckled. The thrill of meeting secretly is just so exciting. When can you stay over next? Chris asked eagerly. Come over tomorrow, she replied. Their vulgar laughter faded as they disappeared into the crowd. Back at the in-laws' house, Pamela and I were busy in the kitchen and dining area. Chris, who arrived late, suddenly changed his face the moment he nibbled on the meal. Snatching the plate from my hands, he threw everything into the outside trash. Don't serve bad food to the relatives, Chris bellowed, to which I retorted, I didn't make anything, you know. What? I smirked inwardly. Now, how shall I expose these two in front of the relatives? I'm Hope, a 50-year-old housewife. 25 years ago, I met Chris through an acquaintance, married him, and the following year gave birth to our son, Dave. Chris, a sales manager at a large corporation, earns more than the average employee. Chris's parents, who treated me like their own daughter after I lost my parents at a young age, get along very well with my mother-in-law, Rebecca. Dave graduated from State University and started working for a foreign company. He moved out when he got the job and visits during long weekends. To outsiders, it might seem like a successful marriage, but in reality, it's a suffocating home where proud Chris reigns like a king, and Dave and I tiptoe around his moods. Before marriage, Chris agreed without hesitation when I said I wanted to continue working. Moreover, he volunteered to share household duties. We can live on my salary alone, but I want to save early for education expenses. It's a big help if Olive works. I'll handle the household chores on weekends since I'll be late on the weekdays, he had said. However, once married, things changed drastically. Whether he returned home on time or worked overtime, Chris would just lounge on the sofa, glued to his mobile phone. Far from helping with chores, he wouldn't even carry his used cup to the sink. And on weekends, it was more of the same, with him laughing in front of the TV or fiddling with his phone or computer. I had to work on either Saturday or Sunday, so on my days off, I left young Dave in Chris's care. Despite restarting work with Chris's consent, he complained every time. One day, fed up, I confronted him, only to be met with a tirade. You're like a demon, dumping the kid on me and expecting me to do household chores on my rare days off. I'm just asking you to wash the dishes you used. Besides, aren't you Dave's dad? My plea seemed to fall on deaf ears, as he contorted his face in annoyance. Raising kids is a mom's job. Every household does it, so stop whining. You should be grateful and respectful that your husband helps with child rearing. Chris lectured me. When he was tired and in a bad mood, he'd make me sit formally on the floor and list every single way I was falling short as a housewife. Cook better meals. Don't use the kids being young as an excuse. Can't you make anything tasty as a housewife? Don't skimp on meals. Prepare at least 3 dishes besides the main course. Every other housewife can do it. Why can't you? You're a failure as a housewife. I'll handle the finances because if I leave it to you, it'll be a mess. Save your earnings too. $100 a month should be enough for your allowance. Eventually, when Dave would run up to him, Chris would visibly grimace and escape to his study. Daddy? Daddy's busy. Go play with Mommy. He'd shoo Dave away with a gesture, sending him to me, busy preparing meals. Even on weekday nights when I left Dave in his care, he'd help with meals and changing clothes, but he'd just let Dave watch kids' videos or TV, never really playing with him. Just play a little with him. I've been working until now. I'm busy. Unlike a housewife who has time, let me rest at home. Do I look like I have free time? Maybe you should visit an optometrist. My sarcastic retort infuriated Chris. His face turned red with anger and he yelled at me furiously. When did you become so important to talk back to me? This is my house. If you have complaints, leave. Take him and go somewhere right now. Knowing full well I had no family home to return to, Chris spat out those words, filling me with utter disgust. The thought of divorce crossed my mind, but that required money. Chris controlled the finances, and saving on my part-time income was impossible. I spoke too harshly. I'm sorry. As long as you understand, once you earn more than me, I'll listen to what you have to say. My love for Chris had long since vanished, but I hesitated to take Dave away from his dad. More importantly, the in-laws were kind people, and Dave adored his grandparents. In front of the in-laws, Chris was kind to us. He played the role of a good father perfectly in front of others. While we were dating, Chris was very kind. He never bragged about his knowledge and seemed like a genuinely nice person. But after we got married, Chris began belittling me for not graduating from a national university. Olive probably doesn't know this. Can't you do a simple calculation like this? What? You don't understand? If you're not from an Ivy League or other famous university, maybe you can't keep up with this topic. At first, he would mock me gently with a smile. But as Dave grew up, he started insisting Dave follow an elite educational path. My son should be able to get into the top public high school in the state. It's free if it's state-run. He can save on transportation by cycling since it's close. That's convenient, but maybe he'll find a school he wants to go to when he's in middle school. I won't allow anything but that school. Transportation and tuition fees are a waste. I was astounded. Was this the talk of someone with a high income? Should we get a tutor then? No need. Just listen in class and getting 100 points is easy. I couldn't believe my ears. If you're worried, you can teach him. You're home by evening, so you have time. I've forgotten middle school stuff. The methods are different now, and when I get home, I'm swamped with housework. The word free time infuriated me. Even as the kids grew, there was still a mountain of work beyond house chores, like supervising homework and checking the next day's necessary items. Chris then twisted his mouth into a mocking smile. I guess it's too much to ask of someone as uneducated as you to teach. Poor Dave, having a mom who graduated from such a low-level school. I was stunned, and Chris continued. By the way, I let you keep working because you said you'd manage the housework. But how long will you continue your job? What? The house has been a bit messy lately, and it's unsettling. Why not quit and focus on Dave's education? Prioritize your family over making pocket money. I stared at Chris wide-eyed. He's the one making the mess. Coming home from work and leaving his shirt and socks in the living room? Leaving used dishes on the dining table? Bringing books from his study and leaving them piled up in the living room and on the sofa? It's not about pocket money. I'm saving for Dave's college and our retirement. We discussed this when I resumed working. I swallowed the words, you're the one making the mess, and just said that, but Chris sneered. Don't flatter yourself thinking you're indispensable at work. You're just disposable part-time, unlike me. Right. Anyway, make sure he goes to the same university as me. I won't accept anything else. His words were provoking, but I held back from retorting. Arguing might make him reluctant even to contribute to the college fund. Later, when Dave got accepted into his desired school by himself, Chris boasted about it as if it were his own achievement. Yeah, he got into that Ivy League feeder school. Smart like me, my son. Without a single congratulations or good job to Dave, Chris bragged to everyone with a smile. I felt disenchanted with him. Someday I'll divorce him. But time passed without action, held back by financial worries and concerns about living. Eventually, Dave graduated from university and started living alone when he got a job. Recently, my conversations with Chris have diminished significantly. This started about 6 months ago when his weekend work and overtime suddenly increased. Our household finances are managed by Chris. I'm fine with him increasing his allowance with his extra earnings, but recently, a large amount was withdrawn from my credit card without my knowledge. Investigation revealed the purchase of a high-brand bag. When I asked Chris, he responded with an annoyed look. I maxed out my credit card, so I used yours. We're family. It should be fine. That fine thing is a 2000 brand bag. Who did you give it to? It's a birthday gift for my niece. I felt suspicious. Chris's brother Elvis has a daughter from a previous marriage, whom Chris has always adored. But would he really give such an expensive gift to a college student? Later, when he came home smelling a perfume and I questioned him, he mentioned his niece. I took her out to eat. She's busy with her part-time job and can't come to grandmother's house this Christmas, so I thought I'd treat her. She seemed lonely with Elvis overseas. It felt dubious, but since I'm not close to the niece, I hesitated to ask her directly. With unresolved feelings, the seasons changed to winter. As Christmas approached, Rebecca called Chris. What? You hurt your back? Chris pressed the speakerphone button so I could hear. Just twisted it a little. I have my husband, so it's nothing serious, but it seems impossible to stand in the kitchen this Christmas. Maybe I should hire a personal chef service. Chris quickly suggested. Don't worry, I'll have Olive make it. What? I was irritated at his casual decision. After all, Christmas at the in-laws' house meant a gathering of the entire family, about 20 people. It's a big task with so many people. Normally it would be manageable if it were just me and Olive, Rebecca sighed. Well, Pamela and Olive can prepare and bring the food. Cooking for 10 should be easy, Chris suggested casually. Pamela is Elvis's wife. This year, Elvis remarried a woman 12 years his junior. It's their first Christmas, but he has to work overseas and won't be back until after the new year. I glared at Chris's back as he made these offhand comments, as if he could cook even potato soup. Olive, Chris says this, but may I ask for your help? Yes, it's okay. I'm sorry to trouble you. Thank you. Mom, don't worry about anything. Just rest. Chris, with a smile, ended the call and then turned to me. Hey, don't be a burden to Pamela, he said haughtily, though he never helps himself. I was irked inside, but tried not to show it and asked, Chris, you're helping with Christmas preparations too, right? You're off work and have no plans. Suddenly, Chris became vague. Well, actually, I have to work that day. Again? Hasn't it been a lot lately? The office is closed, but there's a mistake by one of my subordinates in a deal. I have to apologize to the client. Always doing aftercare. It's a hassle. Chris laughed off and scratched his head. As someone who's only experienced working in small office jobs, I wasn't sure if that's how it is in big companies and just tilted my head. But when I mentioned it to Dave, he looked doubtful. Working after the 20th when it's the office closure? Taking subordinates to the office? That's strange. Yeah, it does seem odd. But with Christmas being so hectic, I didn't want to start a fight and dropped the topic. Eventually, Christmas arrived. As promised to Rebecca, I brought meals to the in-laws' house. Helping my father-in-law John, I busied myself preparing big chairs and sofas in the living room and setting out dishes for 20 people. I was wondering when Pamela would arrive when a message came in the family group chat. Olive, Pamela will be a bit late. Got it. Oh, we're out of whiskey. Should I go buy some? Could you? There's other alcohol, so no rush. Okay, I'll be right back. After greeting the arriving relatives, I left the in-laws' house. I decided to walk to the nearby shopping mall, which had a discount liquor store, instead of taking the car. As I walked through the crowded mall, a familiar scent wafted by. Looking up, I saw Chris, arm in arm with a woman, walking towards me, engrossed in conversation. Chris, with his hat pulled down, didn't notice me. I sneaked a glance at the woman's face and was shocked. It was Pamela. Olive is just so dumb. Not from an Ivy League or any notable university. It's frustrating. Chris grumbled with a disgusted look. His loud voice echoed in the mall. But Dave graduated from such good schools, right? That's amazing. He must have worked hard. Pamela responded in a cloying tone. He's my son, so of course. But it's embarrassing having an ignorant wife. She doesn't know how to support a man. And with no parents, her upbringing is bad. I was furious. I didn't want to be looked down upon by someone like him. So, Chris, why did you marry her? I thought she'd obediently follow me. Wanted to show off to my brother who has only a daughter by having a son. Such reasons? I was dumbfounded. Chris, your rivalry with Elvis is quite obvious. I heard Pamela chuckle as she walked past me. I had stopped in my tracks without realizing it and moved to the edge of the path to avoid blocking others while listening to their conversation. Pamela and Chris had stopped a little distance away, buying drinks as they talked. Serious Elvis would never imagine me and Chris are having an affair, Pamela said. The thrill of sneaking around is just great. When can you stay over next? Come over tomorrow. Okay, I'll be there. Olive believes anything if I say it's work. So convenient she's clueless, Chris laughed crudely. They disappeared into the crowd with vulgar laughter. I trembled with anger. I had my suspicions, and they were indeed having an affair. And with Elvis's wife? They must have been mocking Elvis and me all this time. Unforgivable. Just watch. I'll give them a Christmas they'll never forget. Before returning to the in-laws' house, I had a stop to make, so I called Rebecca and then headed there. When I arrived at the in-laws' house, Pamela was preparing drinks and appetizers in the kitchen with Chris's cousins and their children. Where's Chris? He's not here yet. Should be arriving soon, right? I see. They probably came separately to avoid suspicion. All the relatives had already arrived. The older men at the large table were red-faced from drinking, loudly chatting while watching TV. I approached Pamela with a suggestion. Actually, sure, that works. I made a mistake, so it's good timing. I can show off my cooking skills to everyone. Can I switch these dishes? Your cooking deserves more than these plain plates. Wow, thank you. Meanwhile, Rebecca, who had hurt her back, was pouring wine for relatives in the dining room. Chris finally arrived, dressed in a suit, carrying his laptop case. Got caught up with work even on Christmas. Tough being a salaried man, huh? Chris joined the relatives, starting to drink. Olive, thank you. Can we start bringing out the meal? Let's all eat together. Rebecca called out to us in the kitchen. Okay. I prepared plates and silverware, waiting for Chris's cousins and Pamela to return to the kitchen. Pamela was chatting with relatives while bringing out appetizers. With a meal for 20 people, it needed several trips to bring everything out. As I was deciding what to carry first, Chris appeared. Oh, Chris, you're helping too? It's tough with all this. Chris, seemingly already tipsy, didn't respond, and started nibbling at the prepared meal with his fork. Hey, that's bad manners. Chris exaggeratedly grimaced and for some reason opened the kitchen door, stepping outside with a plate of food. What's going on? I followed and was speechless. He opened the trash bin and dumped the meal inside. Chris went back and forth between the trash bin and kitchen a few times, leaving the empty plates in the sink, then turned and yelled at me. Don't serve bad meals to relatives. I just blinked in disbelief. I didn't make anything, you know. What? It was all Pamela's homemade dishes. For a moment, Chris looked confused, but then he quickly turned to complain to me. Don't lie. Those are our dishes. I know you made it. That's because, seriously, what was that taste? Pig feed would have been better. It's me and Mom who get embarrassed if you serve bad meals. Can't even make a decent meal. You're a failure as a wife. No, as a woman. I calmly informed the furiously yelling Chris. Your taste buds must be off, too. Pamela's meal was delicious. Haven't you ever eaten Pamela's cooking? We always ate out. Wait, what? Pamela didn't have large enough plates, so she brought it in containers. I lent her ours. Chris's eyes widened. She's made too much, thinking to split 10 portions with me, but ended up making enough for 20, so I gave my half to Dave to share with his friends. I explained carefully. Pamela wanted to show off her best dishes to everyone, so it seemed like a good opportunity. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Inwardly, I smirked. Chris always criticized my cooking. I knew he would complain if I served Pamela's food on our dishes. I never expected him to throw it in the trash, though. Now, how shall I expose them in front of the relatives? This is going to be an interesting Christmas. Just then, Pamela arrived at the door, so I loudly announced, Can you believe it? He threw all the meal Pamela made into the trash. The wine bottle fell from Pamela's hand onto the floor. Chris, who turned at the sound, saw Pamela's shocked face and turned pale. Chris, what does this mean? Pamela, that's... Chris was at a loss for words. Pamela's eyes welled up with tears. I ordered ingredients from their origin, researched recipes, and spent a whole day making it. I was so excited to serve everyone a delicious meal. And you threw it all away? Pamela's tearful plea made Chris fumble for an excuse. Sorry, it was a mistake. I'm drunk, see? Don't use being drunk as an excuse. Didn't your parents teach you not to waste food when you were a child? I exploded with pent-up frustration, speaking harshly to Chris. Always acting so superior to me and Dave, the real you comes out when you're drunk. Chris started to retort, but held back in front of Pamela. Perhaps because being close to the room would make the noise audible in the dining room, but it was too late. Sorry for serving a meal worse than pig feed. I'm such a failure as a woman, right? Pamela sat on the floor crying, and the relatives gathered around. What happened? What's going on? As I explained, the in-laws were dismayed. Rebecca looked sadly at Pamela and sighed. I didn't raise him right. I'm sorry. Rebecca apologized to Pamela. The other relatives defended Rebecca and turned on Chris. Chris is 50 years old. It's his own responsibility. Chris, you need to take responsibility. Are you saying we're going to spend Christmas without a meal? I stepped forward in front of Chris and pleaded pitifully. I'm sorry. The mess happened because I swapped the meals on the plates. Chris is really kind, you know? Let me show you proof right now. I took out my mobile phone and pressed the play button on a recording. Olive is just so dumb. Not from an Ivy League or any notable university. It's frustrating. Chris was shocked as the recording played. It was a conversation between Chris and Pamela that I recorded earlier at the shopping mall. Although the background noise was present, the words were clearly audible. Hey, stop that! Please stop. I'm begging you. Chris glared at me threateningly, but I ignored him and let the recording play. Serious Elvis would never imagine me and Chris having an affair. Sneaking around is thrilling. Can I stay over again? Come over tomorrow. The conversation echoed through the open door into the dining area. The shocking exchange silenced the dining room, and all relatives turned their attention to Chris and Pamela. You two? Taking advantage of Elvis being overseas for work to have an affair? Well, that's, Chris stuttered, trying to come up with an excuse. You see, I was just checking on Pamela while her husband's away. It's dangerous for a woman to be alone. Elvis even asked me to look after her. Yeah, we're just good friends. Their feeble excuses made me burst into laughter. Who would believe that? Pamela, you clearly said it's an affair. That was just a joke. Olive, do you have any proof that we're having an affair? Pamela smirked at me, infuriating me further. The conversation alone wasn't enough. I needed more concrete evidence. I shoved my mobile phone in Pamela's face, showing her the receipt for the brand bag Chris bought with my credit card. Pamela, Chris gave you a brand bag as a gift, right? He must have bought you other things too. I couldn't believe the frugal Chris would buy expensive gifts for his niece. Pamela grinned. Yes, as a friend, he gave me a birthday present. Oh, Olive, haven't you ever received a gift from Chris? Even though you're his wife? How miserable! She laughed, shaking her shoulders. He bought me lots of things. Chris always gives in to my requests, right? She looked up at Chris with a sweet voice. Despite insisting they weren't having an affair, she seemed to be flaunting her influence over me. But Chris frowned and said bluntly, I'm going to ask you to return all of that later. Huh? Pamela looked stunned. I never said they were gifts. I just bought them because she said she wanted them. I can't imagine spending my hard-earned salary on someone else. Right. You even hesitate to pay for Dave's tuition. I nodded in agreement, leaving Pamela dumbfounded. What the hell is this? Wait, didn't I say you'd have to pay me back? Pamela showed a confused expression. It's obvious you'd think it's a joke. No, I'm serious, Chris said with a straight face. I don't like spending money on anyone but myself. You need to pay back your share of the hotel costs we've incurred together. Giving things to Pamela for free doesn't benefit me at all. It must total around $30,000, right? Pamela's face turned red with anger. She lashed out in anger. Don't be ridiculous. What was the point of having an affair with me? It's absurd to resent spending money on a woman you like. It was to get back at my brother, Chris said coldly. It was fun stealing from my brother behind his back. You were kind of my type. And when you came on to me, I thought it was my lucky day. Chris smirked. Anyway, pay back the money you owe. It's all recorded in the household book. You must be getting more than enough from my brother anyway. Tears welled up in Pamela's eyes, frozen with shock. That's terrible. I liked Chris and had an affair with him. I never thought he was such a person. Yelling, Pamela grabbed her coat and bag. That's it. Let's break up. I never want to see your face again. Okay, but make sure you pay back the full amount. Pay you back? Idiot. My serious husband is 10 times better than you. As Pamela stormed out, she bumped into someone in the hallway and fell. Grabbing the hand offered to her, she gasped. Elvis? Back home for Christmas, huh? Always lively here. Elvis, smiling breezily, slowly surveyed the tense faces of Chris and the relatives. You were talking about me, right? Go on, continue. Why are you back, brother? I wanted to spend Christmas at home. Worked hard to finish early and come back. Chris turned pale at Elvis's plastered-on smile. Looks like Pamela has been quite the help to you, Chris. Elvis's gaze shifted between Chris and Pamela. Pamela clung to Elvis with a pleading voice. It wasn't my fault. He pressured me into it. I didn't want to betray you, Elvis. Believe me. Huh? Who was the one always complaining about their boring, only good-for-work husband, saying his clothes had the worst taste and his birthday gifts were cheap? I don't know anything about that. You must have made it up. Elvis, he's just harassing me because he can't match you in work or studies. I respect and love you. You won't talk about divorce, right? Pamela looked tearfully at Elvis, clinging to him. We, along with Chris and the relatives, were dumbfounded. Pamela, accustomed to a wealthy lifestyle thanks to Elvis's income, was panicking at the thought of losing her luxuries after the divorce. Elvis smiled at Pamela and took out his mobile phone. Was going to wait until after Christmas, but now's as good a time as any. He swiped his phone screen and images of Chris and Pamela appeared, snuggling up and entering a hotel, gazing at each other while waiting for a traffic light, kissing while getting out of a car. One compromising image after another appeared on Elvis's phone. Elvis, when did you... I had a detective follow her when I left for Japan. Asked him to tail my wife as soon as I was gone. Elvis explained casually. Every time I came back, more brand bags and accessories filled the closet. But there was no purchase history on the family card. Naturally, I suspected an affair. Elvis shrugged and looked coldly at Chris. But I never expected the affair to be with my own brother. His usual kindness gone. Elvis's voice was filled with intense anger, silencing the room. There's more. Do you want to hear the conversations recorded through the hotel room, too? No, that's fine, Pamela replied, her voice barely audible. So, you'll agree to a divorce? Yes. Pamela slumped in despair while Chris surprisingly remained calm. Poor brother. First his wife says they're incompatible, and now his second wife cheats on him. And his daughter didn't even go to an Ivy League college. Chris mocked Elvis. In comparison, my life's a win. I fathered a son, my boy, landed a job at a top company, and I have a happy marriage. I've beaten you, brother. You're an idiot, I said, disgust in my voice. Chris blinked, surprised, as I half smiled. You're heading for a divorce, obviously, and neither your son's education nor his job is your achievement. It's all Dave's. Of course it is. The relatives nodded in agreement. Divorce? Over a single affair? Don't be ridiculous. Chris exclaimed, his eyes wide. Chris, you don't need to come for Christmas from next year, the in-laws said quietly. Why not? Because we're disowning you. What? Disown your son who gave you a grandson? You're joking. Chris laughed, but his laughter faded as he saw the serious faces of his parents-in-law. And so, they spent Christmas in a somber mood, a hellish one for Chris and Pamela. Pamela, having signed the divorce papers Elvis brought, left the in-laws' house. I apologized to the relatives for the commotion and returned home. As I was leaving, the in-laws apologized to me. After Christmas, I sent the signed divorce papers to Chris. I kept the apartment we lived in while Chris moved to a smaller one. After much reluctance, Chris and Pamela eventually agreed to pay me a hefty alimony, as negotiated through lawyers. Chris, with his high income, could afford it. Later, Elvis revealed something unexpected. Chris had been secretly investing in stocks and had almost depleted his savings. He had to borrow money to pay the alimony. Overconfident and underprepared, he had lost heavily in his investments. That explained his reluctance to fund Dave's education. After confessing the reason for his divorce to a colleague, the news spread throughout his company. Ashamed, Chris quit his job and now works part-time, withdrawing into his apartment, distrustful of others. Pamela, used to living luxuriously on Elvis's money, had no savings and begged her parents to pay her part of the alimony. Angry, they paid it, but made her work at a relative's company, where she's closely monitored and worked hard. After the divorce, I moved into a 3-bedroom apartment and lived comfortably. Free from someone constantly nagging about household chores, I took exams to become a full-time employee. No more snide remarks, and I can spend my money freely. I feel incredibly refreshed. Now I want to watch over Dave and spend the rest of my life meaningfully.